30 days away from one of the things I thought I would never announce, the Common Cause 1-year anniversary. This coming November 9th at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, you have your opportunity to win some of the greatest prizes, all while contributing to a phenomenal cause, the Purple Hearts Home. This is going to be the biggest event for Pauper Commander. I'm going to do the absolute insane amount of prizes for everyone, so make sure you register at omgmtg.com. Links going live. Make sure you register. I will see you there.
All right, you guys. Welcome back to another episode of The Common Theory. And as always, I'm your host, Gator, along with my man, Kunks. Depressingly enough, you guys, Rohan has been out for a few weeks now. He's gotten sick. It's just the flu, nothing too wild, but he has no voice at the moment, so he will not be with us again. But we wish him the best and definitely hope he gets better soon. But with all that said, we have a very, very cool episode for you guys today. We're going to be talking about the decks of their era. Yes, so we're going to kind of be hitting you guys with a little going back in time, which is going to be, it's going to be pretty sweet, honestly. But before we get to our topic, let's see how everybody's doing today. Let's see how the family's doing. Kunks, how you been doing, bro? Everything been treating you all right?
Nah, nothing crazy. He's just super happy that my friend Kali from Sipstream got to go to Vegas. I sent her my copy of Dargo Ketis, which is actually your copy of Dargo Ketis. I built a physical copy of it, shipped it off to her. She said she had a ton of fun playing it. That's to awesome. The point where was a Sandwich from GirlPod also ended up ordering like a copy of the deck too.
Oh, that's super cool.
Which, yeah, like Dargo Ketis is like the perfect deck to give to a new player because, like I said before, Dargo is maximum smiles per hour. You sack a whole bunch of stuff. You have a 7/5 trampler on board on like turn 2 to 3. Just beat people's faces in.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Can't get more battle cruiser than that.
Yeah, exactly. But with our guest here, Lobbert, how are you doing, my bro?
I'm doing pretty good. Just riding that high from getting back from Vegas.
Dude, just tell us about it. How was it, man? I mean, we didn't get to go, but how was it?
So I've gone to Vegas, I think, every year but one that they've had it. Lately, when I've been joining the PDH crew under the banner and just like playing PDH, I think is some of the most fun that I've had. Like it, like that's definitely awesome. Is. Like just like sitting great. There and just like trying to like proselytize, basically, of like, hey, we've got decks, come play. And as soon as like it's awesome. Usually when someone's like, hey, come play your deck, I'm like rolling my eyes, but people were like, their eyes would light up and be like, oh, I can just come try this? Like, you have stuff for me? And, like, just, like, meeting some of the coolest people, like, out of the blue. Work week's been a little difficult, but, like, just thinking back of, like, yeah, that was awesome. Has been, like, a great
yeah, like, I heard from my friend who's over there. Yeah, I heard that the PDH area was, like, super packed the entire time.
We got our area right at the front of the command zone.
On the first
day 2 and 3. Like day 1, it was like behind an escalator, and like we didn't get a lot of foot traffic. But then, like when we moved into the foot traffic area, we were like front and center. It was perfect because Bobby had an exhibitor pass and could get in early. And nice. We've talked about it with the judges in the past years of like, can we just like reserve one table for this? And then at the very least, it's a meeting spot, so people will come. Like, oh, okay, we've got enough people. We don't have another table like held down right now, so we're gonna say like, okay, you just run off and find someone else. Well, like you run off and like find a table and then come back when you're done and we'll find you another game. And I'll put it this way, it's like cool enough that I'm trying to make it a point to go to all of the conventions next year because I'm just like, this is what I like want to do with my life. I want to spend as much time in a convention center playing PDH with random people as I can.
Oh, that's awesome.
Hopefully we can join you in Atlanta next year.
Hope so.
Yes, that is the plan. That is what we're trying to do, to say the least.
Yeah, Chicago in February is a little bit too close. I really don't want to go to Vegas in the middle of summer. Yeah. Atlanta's like right down the street from us. Not really, but it's close enough.
It's not bad. It's not a bad drive. I used to do it all the time, so it's pretty good. With all that said, let's get into our topic. And before we even dive to that topic, I kind of messed up there, guys. Lobbert, let's introduce yourself, man. Please tell the people who you are.
Okay, yeah. So I'm a Pauper Commander YouTuber, basically now. So I used to have a 60 card Pauper podcast. I will brag to say that we've won podcasting awards for that, and that it was the biggest 60-card podcast, or the 60-card Pauper podcast out when I was doing it. I left that just because, I wanted to buy a house. I needed to get married, like a bunch of like real life things. And then when I came back, I saw Brad, who was like our patron back in the day. He had like built the whole PDH pod and was doing Saturday streams, and I joined him, and was just like, this is what I want to be doing 100%. Like, his enthusiasm for the game is just like infectious. It's amazing.
Well, I mean, that's awesome, man. A pleasure to have you with us today. And let's dive into this subject. And as always, guys, it's started to become a trend now because of our guests and everybody we've been having. I got the notebook and I'm ready to do some stuff. And I got my notes going and I'm ready to go. So I'm really excited for this one because this one really takes us back in time. And so, sorry, Franklin, I know you didn't exist in the format at the time. But,
no, I didn't.
But you do have an experience with a few of these decks that we're going to be bringing up. So I'm really excited.
Yeah, thank God for you bringing them out from like the old vault. You dust them off. Go.
Yes, I lose with them.
Is it still good?
But let's dive into this. And the first one I want to talk about, just to get it out of the way, and we're going to be bringing it back up throughout the conversation anyways, is Sphinx Summoner. And the reason I want to bring this up is, well, let's be honest, who's better to talk about Sphinx Summoner than the pilot that brought it back? I don't want to say from the dead, but kind of brought it from the depths and revived it and took it to tournaments. So what are your thoughts on that, man? Like, was there like some one random card that like magically got printed to where you were like, let's take this to a tournament? Or
no. So, I mean, it goes along with the philosophy I had. And like the biggest reason I like said like, yes, let's do this is because I think it's kind of a hot take. I haven't, I like Kunks. Like, I don't know how long you've been playing PDH, but like I've only been playing competitively for like a year. And then before that I played, a lot in a year before that. But then, like past 2 years, my playing was like a few times a year because I couldn't get a game together. So like I've had to go back and speak to people and have them come on my stream with these old decks and like just learn for myself a lot of the time. I believe that a lot of what people were doing in like the old, I've been told it's called the old like German blue meta, like extremely combo heavy. I think that they were right about a lot of things.
So let me hit you with something here real quick. So I got to get this pushed out there real quick. A lot of those decks weren't really combo decks. So like, I know that's kind of what's been said back in the day, but like Armix was like one of the biggest components of that meta. And none of them played combos. And it was like one of the decks, and we'll be talking about that specifically here soon. But continue. My apologies.
No, yeah, that's totally justified. And like, that's going to be like, I'm great. You're a great person to have this conversation with. I expect to learn a lot. Like right along with a lot of the viewers I anticipate. They really did identify a lot of like the most powerful things that you can do with these cards. I just think that like over time, like people stopped playing them less, and there were reasons for that. So like when the problem I was trying to solve when I was making Sphinx Summoner was I was playing Thraben Watcher, and I was like, if I think combo is so broken, I'd better just play it. Like that's the best way to like, tamper my expectations. If I think if it's too good, then I'll just play with cards that are too good. And if it's not, then now I know its weakness. So like I can only benefit. And I recommend that for everyone who has a problem with like some of these decks.
Oh yeah, very much so.
Yeah, definitely.
Part of the huge barrier though in doing that is that a lot of these old lists aren't tuned for our current meta. Like a lot of people, like you're thinking to yourself, like, well, that person's so good, they made this incredible thing. Like my perception of it was, well, they think that I don't respect them by picking it up and playing different cards. And there's like, in competitive games, there's always going to be elitism of like, well, I know better or whatever. But like nobody owns a commander, nobody owns an archetype. I had to overcome that, and it was a huge barrier for me. Just I don't know, social anxiety. But I was like, what I want to play with the Mere Retriever combo, and what do I think is the best commander there is? Working back from a win condition to the commander for making that happen. And that's why I chose Sphinx Summoner.
Yeah, you picked the perfect one. Literally the best one. I mean, Sphinx Summoner is such a powerful deck. I mean, back in the day, the argument used to be that blue and black were the strongest two colors of our format. That was the old thought process, which I somewhat agreed with, but my pushback always used to push to red, even though Simic was next in line to most people. But red and Izzet used to just, I was like, man, Izzet could just actually win a game, which was always my pushback. It's like, I understand that you and Demir can prolong a game, but I could cross the finish line with Izzet. And that was kind of like the biggest pushback I always had for them. And this was well before the Gretchen time. I mean, we're talking about new Commander Legends, which is what, 2000 or 2020?
The first one's 2020, and then Baldur's Gate came out in 2022.
Yeah, because the big push that happened, which really made like the competitive scene, was Commander Legends, the original one. And when Armix came out, Armix was the house, right? Like if you were playing, and even now, I would argue that if you played Armix in a pod full of Simic, you're winning that with an Armix. Like Simic just cries. And so one of the definitive decks back in that day was Tatyova. Tatyova was just like so incredibly powerful, and right with them was Laylor Weaver. They could not beat an Armix. Like Armix destroyed those decks.
All right, Gator, sorry to interrupt you, but for all the viewers who may have never played against an Armix, because I don't think I've seen one myself anytime this year, Armix is a 3-mana 3/2 that costs 2 generic and a black that says whenever Armix Filigree's Thrasher attacks, you may discard a card. When you do, target creature defending player controls gets -X/-X until end of turn, where X is the number of artifacts you control, plus the artifact cards in your graveyard, and it has partner.
Yeah, that's actually what made Armix so incredibly powerful. The ability to partner with several different commanders, and in that era, they were all blue, and they were incredibly powerful. The engine that you could create with an Armix in the past with, in fact, can you assist us again with this, Franklin? Ghost of Ramirez.
Ghost of Ramirez de Pietro is another 3-mana commander that costs 2 generic and 1 blue for a 2/3 that says Ghost cannot be blocked by creatures with toughness 3 or greater. Whenever Ghost deals combat damage to a player, choose up to 1 target card in the graveyard that was discarded or put there from the library for this turn, and put that into its owner's hand. And it also has partner.
So the reason these two were like so significant to that era is together they created an incredibly powerful engine. Honestly, very similar to what Sphinx Summoner is doing in this day and age, where you have these 2 separate commanders in this instance, where you establish this destroy engine and this recovery engine to where you're able to pivot to 2 different plans while still using, in that era, was a cranioplating to buff one of the 2 commanders to be able to Voltron your opponents out to finish the game. I really like that deck from its time because it was very to the point. It didn't have any ways to combo or anything like that in the deck. It was just an incredibly attrition-based archetype, which I appreciated. I think now...
We didn't have a tournament timer at that time either.
That's what I was going to ask.
I did not get to that yet. Yes, I did not get to that. I think one of the crucial things is these decks were all incredibly slow. My average times when I used to play, I believe I sat around like 3 hours was average for some games, because I mean it was a pestilence era, like we played a lot of things like that. But let me ask you something, Lobbert. Give me your opinion on this one. One reason why I think a lot of these decks, and we'll talk about a few of them, and I think they've become outdated, is due to their ability to pivot. And I think that's one reason why you have become successful with Sphinx Summoner, because you have 2 plans. You can combo or you can attack. Is that like one of the driving forces that wanted you to play that deck to begin with, or?
Yeah, because all of the pieces work fairly well outside of Ashnod's Altar as just like value pieces. So if I, like in my meta, that was very combat heavy because we were transitioning from casual to competitive, and people were like, I'll just bring the best deck I've ever built, which isn't it isn't really the same. So I was also playing on the Common Connoisseurs Discord, which their meta is a lot more like sacrificing creatures. So if I wanted to play a combo, it had to be very edict proof. Like the pieces had to outvalue opponents that were going like a control mid-range plan, and they needed to block something. As that meta developed, Wilson became pretty dominant in it because it doesn't care about chump blockers among like other reasons. But yeah, that's why I wanted to play it, is like if they edicted, I could just sack my Mirror Retriever, go get something else, and if like I didn't have the Ashnod's Altar, there were at least infinite things to sack that mana restricted. And that's something that I've like carried forward, and like I'm experimenting a lot more with now. Like right now I'm playing with like Dross Skull Bomb, which if you're not familiar,
nice.
It's a colorless for an artifact. You can pay 1 and sacrifice it and draw a card, or pay 2 and a black and sacrifice it and return a creature from your graveyard to your hand and draw a card at sorcery speed. So that you can loop with either of those pieces and restart your combo, or you can go find the Archaeo Mender. So if somebody's trying to outvalue you by attacking you or edicting you, these combo pieces just work. And even the pieces that aren't that, like the cost reducers, are the best ramp spells, I think. I have access to. They're the best. They're incredible.
Yeah.
Free rocks are the best.
Yeah, exactly.
That's why casual commander players complain about free rocks all the time.
Yep. Well, let me ask you a question, Franklin. So I'm going to have you say one more, and then I'm going to question you about a deck of its era. And the only reason I could do this is because I built it and attempted to bring it to the current meta. And I'll let you talk about that. But could you bring up Tormod, please?
Tormod is a mono black legendary zombie wizard that costs 3 generic and a black that says whenever 1 or more cards leave your graveyard, create a tapped 2/2 black zombie creature token. And it also has partner.
Perfect. So the partner pairing that I used to play with that and was very popular. In fact, it even had a nickname by the name of Toast, was Ghost Remerds in Tormod. And this was, I would say, one of the most popular commander pairings that there was. I mean, this deck, if you played against this deck in the day, it was bonkers. It was able to play every transmute spell in the format and produce 2/2s every single turn. It was able to play cards like Relic. It could play Nombos, and it was just bonkers. The deck was so good.
And if you're not familiar, the one of the most important parts of this is that Ghost, when you transmute a transmute spell, you pick that card right back up, like when you hit somebody. So you can just like transmute every turn. And
that was part of the great engine that you transmute, make a zombie out of it.
Yep. Well, it was gross because the first card you always tried to transmute was a Shred Memory or a Muddle. So you go get Deprive, and then you Mystic Sanctuary, Deprive, loop your opponents while you're transmuting your other cards. The deck was just so gross. The deck was gross. So I was like, this deck has to be good. I'm going to bring it back. And I bought Foil Ghost, Foil Tormod, man. I was so into it. I was testing it. Franklin, please tell them how well my testing went.
You never won a single game. Dargo punched you in the face a lot. You died to board wipes. Both commanders, I think, have 2 toughness, so you can't.
3.
So none of them would survive.
A 2 and a 3. Yeah.
Yeah. So they're both fairly frail. If you try to say, I'm going to get a ghost trigger, I'm like, no. Before that even happens, bolt it. So a single board wipe sets you back so far. Plus, was it Tormod being 4 mana, then 6? It's like if it dies once, which it will because it only has 2 toughness. It's so painful.
I still remember some games that we were playing where I was just essentially the punching bag for the table. It was just so sad because, like, Gut had been printed with Baldur's Gate, and it didn't matter what, like gut white specifically, just all these protection spells just destroyed you. You're just like, try to kill your gut, haha, and you would be tapped out because all your removal spells were like 3 and 4 mana in that time. You played a few, but when there's aggressive decks, it just could not function. It was backbreaking.
Yeah, it's funny. You could even just say pro black gut. You only have your zombies and Tormod up. All right, cool.
I have a question. The rumor and the perception of that era is that engines tended to stay alive and live longer, while payoffs were like the target, and nobody wanted to spend their removal spells or anything. So they'd wait on them, and then the engine would accumulate so much advantage that eventually they would be able to go for it. Do you feel like the amount of removal has changed, or is it just that they're like, what do you think is up with that?
So one of the things that happened was, so that's not necessarily true, even though it is to an extent. So it depended what your table was playing. Typically, they waited. So the one deck that you could never do that against in that era was Izzet Guildmage, because Izzet Guildmage was the deck that put one counterspell on the stack and then just copied it 12 times to stop every one of its opponents. In, this is like turn like 13, 14, right? So you have unlimited mana at this point, especially because it was a big mana deck of its era. But the other problem was a lot of these decks. So, for instance, I'm just going to run through a few of them. Like a Tatyova rewarded you for just playing the game with just lands. Laylor Reaver rewarded you in the same method because you were still the Cultivate deck, because actually all the land untappers did not exist yet. So you were pinched to only having the Green Weaver. And then other decks, for instance, like Baleful Strix and Crackling Drake, a lot of these decks at that time were trying to go so tall and so wide with different aspects that they nomboed themselves in different aspects.
The number of interaction and removal pieces have actually gone down from that era. Because I remember Gator saying, back in my day, we played 30 kill spells and we didn't really like it, but we did it anyway. And now we're down to just like 16 per deck. Like 16 pieces of interaction.
That's not necessarily true. What Lobbert said is relatively right. Like, we did hold. Like, we did sit and wait for that moment. So I think the big difference now is that because the card quality has gotten better, that moment time frame has changed. So, for instance, in that era, the time was turn 14, and now it's turn 5, right? It's just our card quality has gone up, and so has our commanders. And because our commanders are so much more threatening, I mean, I definitely think a lot of our commanders are much more threatening than they used to be.
Yeah, because as you mentioned, between Baleful Strix and Crackling Drake, I don't want to say they're exactly the same commander, but they both have the same exact line of text of when an ETBs draw a card.
Well,
and they're both flyers.
Let me ask you something, Lobbert. I actually have a question for you. Do you have any experience playing against Tatyova recently? I mean, have you seen it in any events?
I played against it in Chicago. There was a person who randomly walked up to my table and said, I have this deck, I'd like to play it. And I look at Tatyova and I go, oh, you want the big boy decks? And we got the table together.
Actually, I want to hear your experience with that deck.
I do, actually, yes. How was it?
So I got off the ground pretty early, and I would say there was Rilsa, there was Spiritmonger, and... Ooh. There was Tatyova and myself on Sphinx Summoner. Spiritmonger, like in most competitive games, there's always one player that can't get off the ground. That's been my tournament experience. There's one player who can't get off the ground, and you're like, please, I need your help, dude. And then there was Rilsa, who was like on the cusp of being very threatening, and I cranial plating them to death first because... I had like a few removal spells in hand, and I was like, I don't have to care about Spiritmonger. I just have to care about this Tatyova player. And I presented lethal, I think it was somewhere like 8 turns in a row. And I just never broke through. And and when I finally could break through, they were like, okay, I have gained enough life that it doesn't matter. And then I can take this hit and then go to the next turn and bounce your thing over and over again like I have been. And yeah, I lost that game, and it felt close, but like it got to do its thing, and I solved, I removed a player that could have helped me win that game because I felt like I was in pole position at that time and I couldn't close it out. That's how that went. I've played against another one on this list, Parcel Beast, very recently.
Yes. How was that one?
It, again, won the game. So it was Alcadron, and it was actually when he was like, I'm going to retire this deck. I don't want to play it anymore.
Oh, that's sad. I like that.
It's very sad. And I was like, dude, but it's so good. But it was just like, he's like, yeah, I either get completely shut down or... I have an engine, and that engine is just like, either let me have it or I don't, and it's like very polarizing, and he doesn't like that type of gameplay. If someone were to let someone have an engine like that,
that's what these decks were of that era, right? Like, that's what these decks were.
Yeah, people, like, if you can find these old lists and look at their engines, they're real. Like, there's a lot to be gained there, and that's part of what I have been doing. And before this, we brought up the old tier list to, like, you know, what was good then. And there's, like, a lot of stuff on here. And then there's, like, these parasitic decks that, like, they were only good in this meta. Like, I want to say, like, Witherbloom Apprentice is the king.
I was literally about to say that. I was going to say, well, Witherbloom used to sit down and do nothing.
Yeah, and that's still something you can do in different ways now. I've gotten a fair bit of, like, success. Like, I don't know if we've ever talked about it, but my Thraben Watcher win rate in practice games is about 40%. In tournaments, it's 20%.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
But, like, that deck plays a lot of cards like Prismatic Strands or whatever the one that's like 2 and a white, prevent damage to you and creatures you control. Just these, like, random fogs. It's because you can, like, get into a 1v1 with those decks. If you can sit down and be like, okay, we're going to get rid of those guys. Let's just get in a 1v1 so that, like, my chances are way better. Like, that's what I was really afraid of going into my finals, was there were 2 green decks, and then it was Nolan on Malcolm Breaches. And then I was...
finals,
Yep.
I remember.
And, like, one of the only reasons I won was because Malcolm Breaches went for it and was, you know, in pole position, and then I watched them use all of their interaction, and I won second. And so, like, that's most of what I do is, like, really meta-dependent. I know I'm not playing the fastest or best deck, and that's a strategy to not take as much aggro. And a problem that I'm running into with Sphinx Summoner is it's got this perception now that it's really, really good. And now I have to, like, transition the deck to, like, okay, I was counting on being second scariest. Now I'm most scariest a lot of the time. And
well,
what do I do?
To be fair, the deck is really, really good. I mean, so not saying it, like, you know, we can't pretend that it's not really good. In fact, here, I can give you an example. I actually have been recommending Izzet Guildmage recently to a few players just to see what they could do with it. And wow, the feedback that I received was, like, super negative. I actually felt kind of bad because I recommended it to the players. I actually recommended it to one local player and one player online. And the feedback I got was like, deck is just bad. And I was like, well, what do you mean? And so there's a few lists online for Izzet Guildmage that have, like, upwards of 10,000 plus views, like, just an absurd amount of views. And so people are pulling from that list specifically and then played it as it was and then switched it to their specific liking, right? And all the feedback I got was, in the beginning of the game, turns 1 through 6, you're the pincushion. You are the beat stick for everyone. And there's too many decks that have beaters now that pummel your face in. And if you stop it, by the time you do, you want to play, once again, one of these engines, right? So backstory before I finish that thought is Izzet Guildmage engine used to be play, like, Thrill of Possibility, copy it twice, draw so many extra cards and only pitching 1 card, right? So that was the engine that Izzet Guildmage was. But with these new aggressive decks, you can't prematurely play the Izzet Guildmage because, 1, it cannot block. 2, if it gets bolted, you're completely out of the game. So you have to wait for it. So you have to play these wrath effects to try to slow your opponents down. But our power creep with some of these creatures, they're like 3 butts now. They're like 4 butts now. Like, you're not fiery candidating these creatures away. They live through this shit now. It's really bad. So he's just like, I can't play the deck. Like, it's just, every time I've tried, I get to this point. He goes, Izzet Guildmage specifically is bonkers at winning the game. Getting to that point, it's awful. You just play rocks, hope they don't try to hit you, but you're an Izzet, and you're terrifying to them, so they hit you. But also, too, here's a good one for you, Lobbert. I don't know if you've noticed this recently. There's a lot of decks now in the format that are aggressive that are doing global damage now. Right? We have Ketis Kellis, we have Dargo Ketis, we have Loyal Subordinate, we have Arabella, right? We have all of these decks that are starting to hit everyone at the same time, right? Malcolm Ketis, right? all the pinger strategies, right? Third path decks hit everyone with all their pingers, right? So we're getting all this now symmetrical damage to the table, even Sivers for crying out loud, right? Like it's getting to the point to where everyone's getting hit. So decks like Izzet Guildmage, to where they used to be like, oh, well, you're beating up Tatyova because they're gaining life, and I could just be here protecting and stopping win cons. My opinion might be a hot take, but I don't think that's no longer a viable strategy because you are now incidentally getting hit. But what do you think of that, Lobbert? Is that kind of fair? Maybe, schmaybe?
Yeah, I did an entire. You said I can pimp anything. I did an entire video on pingers, where
Yes.
I tried to do it as well researched as possible, and I go into all of this. Your experience and the experiences of these other players with Izzet Guildmage is exactly mine. Wales brought it to my stream a lot for a while. And he was honestly, I think, one of the more experienced players and like more acquainted with the competitive scene than anyone else. But when it was the combo deck and no one else was drawing aggro, like that deck doesn't have the blockers. It just couldn't live through it. And I mean, looking at these lists, like there wasn't really an aggro contingent. There wasn't just like there's like this cool balance right. I don't know about balance. There's this cool dynamic right now. There's a lot of new people coming into PDH. Like I've seen like numbers where it's like last year there was like there's like 4 times as many decks now on Moxfield as there were like last year. Like the wave is coming.
Oh yeah,
it's catching on.
Sure.
Yeah,
100%. I mean, we're even getting more of a local scene here, like just generally with more players. I mean, me and Kunks are actually starting at a shop doing some games and gameplay videos there and stuff like that. So we're also getting a lot.
There's going to be these new players coming into tournaments, and they are going to be favoring either lists that they've like just like net decked, or they're going to just be playing some like aggro pile. And that's what I saw a lot of in like when I went to RIW. There's me on Sphinx Summoner, there's Clay on Weavers, and then there's like some guy on, I don't even remember what it's called. This mono black, it flips the top card of opponents' decks, and you can play them, and like your opponent doesn't get to see what cards they were.
Oh, Gonti.
Yeah, and it's just like this random Gonti pile that somebody brought. And then there's like, I saw Llanowar Visionary, like, not Llanowar Visionary, Llanowar, that counts the
Abomination?
Abomination. I don't know card names. That's why I have to do research for my video. But like, it's this weird dichotomy, and like, you do have to plan for these like pinger and aggro decks, as well as these just like, in just a completely other tier decks that are like, yeah, if you don't stop my, Parcel Beast on turn 3 or whatever, then I'm gonna have 12 mana on turn 4, and you better be feeling lucky, bub. Like that I just keep going, and it's interesting planning for both. Anyway,
I completely agree with that. So let me ask you a question, Franklin. So back when I got you into CPDH, this is going to be a funny one. So. Don't laugh too hard at Franklin, you guys. So my attempt to get Franklin originally in the format was like 2020?
The very end of 2020, yeah.
Yeah. And I hand him my foiled out Crackling Drake deck. I was playing a Ghostly Flicker version of my list. That was my favorite way to win, was I would try to kill you with the Drake. You'd kill it over and over again, think you had me beat. And then I would flicker Drake you out of the game, and you'd be like, no! The deck was good for its time. Not sure how well it is off anymore. I actually kind of do. Played a little bit of it not too long ago. But what were your thoughts when I remember what you did when I handed you that deck and we played some games? But go for it, man. What was your expectations the first time you started playing that deck?
So let me read out Crackling Drake from memory. Crackling Drake is a 4-mana X4 with flying that says whenever the cost is 2 generic, 1 blue, 1 red.
Isn't it blue, blue, red, red?
Yep, blue, red, red. That was its.
Okay.
That was what it struggled about. That was very hard to cast. It was very hard to cast.
So it says whenever it enters, you draw a card, and it has power equal to the number of instants and sorceries in your yard, and I believe in exile. Yeah, it should be in exile because it jumpstart
Yes.
the mechanic, not the set. came out, so you could jumpstart like Radical Idea and still keep its power.
Correct.
When you handed it to me and you told me it was a control deck, I was like, okay, I'll try to counter important things, and then I'll just cast Crackling Drake. I'll swing in for damage eventually. At worst, I'll recast it for like 6 mana, draw a card. I recasted it for like 12 mana, drew a whole bunch of cards. When Gator kept removing it, I was like, I don't care. I'm drawing cards. That's all I care about. I'm a control deck. As long as I keep some mana open, I counter the 1 or 2 important things per turn. Recast Crackling Drake, it'll get in eventually.
Yeah,
I won that game.
For reference point, that deck of its time played every wrath that existed at the time. Swirling Sandstorm. I'm talking about like old school, like, oh yes, I know. It never killed your Drake. It's a flyer.
Oh, I get it.
We're like rolling earthquakes.
Yep. So, I mean, it was a deck of its time. I've updated it here and there, played it, but it also
Yeah,
suffers.
it's like that old girlfriend that you think about like every once in a while, like every 2 years. Like, why did that memory come back in? Let me remember back. Oh, that's why we broke up.
Well, I know what you think about. But, I mean, so it's kind of like a trend, which I think Sphinx Summoner doesn't fall into this. So the more we talk about these, the more of a trend that we're seeing about the engines that these decks make. But also, too, they're kind of susceptible, right? Tatyova doesn't have a lot of blockers. And or if the creatures that it puts into play, you never want to block with those. The same with Izzet Guildmage, right? Sure, there could be a Murmuring Mystic plane you could do. I get it. But let's be realistic. You got to hunt, dig, hope it lives, hope it resolves. It's 42 hoops, not reliable.
Oh yeah, it costs like 1 million mana, and the biggest problem with Murmuring Mystic is like, it's a common now. Why don't we just play in TPI? Why don't we just play TPI?
Yep.
I did log like 15 games with Murmuring Mystic, and yeah, I walked away from that deck.
Yeah, and in January we could all walk away from TPI and just play Saheeli Rai.
Yeah.
Yay!
Very upgraded TPI. I think that's like super broken card. But besides the point of that, it's like Ghost and Tormod, right? Ghost and Tormod was the only deck that could actually go wide of that time frame, realistically. And
Very slowly, but realistically.
One per turn. And it's just like, yeah, it's just slow.
Oh
Like
yeah, Chain Devil didn't exist yet, right?
None of those
Right.
creatures did.
Yeah, Curse of Marauder and Chain Devil are like game changers for sure.
Yep, all we
At least in
had
terms
was
of that deck.
well, we didn't have Demon's Disciple either. All we had was Fleshbag and Slum Reaper. Those are the only 2 we had, and it was such like, okay, now I'm going to show my age. I used to play Chainer's Edict.
Hey, bro, you got to eat it somehow.
Dude,
I mean, I did play the
last
card.
night-
Like, I did play
Last
it.
night, I decided to pick up 60 card Pauper again, and I was like, why don't I just play Chainer's Edict in this slot? That's yeah, you're old.
Yes. Yep. I played Chainer's
Hey, bro,
Edict.
sometimes you got to kill. Oh no, Swift Sphere is banned.
At one point, I played Rakdos. That was like the deck I picked up. So I picked up Armix and Dargo after Crackling Drake started losing just a lot. And I played Diabolic Edict, Chainer's Edict. Innocent Blood was the best one.
God, yeah, that's you're ancient, bro.
I mean, we didn't even have all of the Grey Flickers yet. We had Undying and Supernatural Stamina. Those are the only 2 we had.
I think there may have been one other one.
No, Not Dead After All, and the other Undying Malice, and whatever the...
No, they keep...
We
the
didn't
same
have
thing with
any
like
of
all
those.
the thrills. Yeah, same thing with all the throws. We get one new throw and we get one new Undying effect every single standard set now.
Yeah.
Edicts, I think, are like just like such a huge, like, what do you call it? Environmental, just like...
Boom.
No, boon.
No, I say boom.
Hey, bro, you gotta kill those. You gotta kill those bridges somehow.
Just like environmental pressure. Like if when I first
I agree.
started looking at competitive decks, I was always trying to figure out, like, a consistent thing was like a lot of them were sub 10 creatures. A lot of them had like 3. And I was like, man, how are they winning? Or how are these so good? How do people not just like punch them in the face? You know? And
So,
So I
Gator,
started-
how did you people just punch him in the face?
But I mean, eventually, it sounds like people did. But like that was something that I was like trying to like emulate. I was like, I don't know why this works for them, but I'm going to try to find lists that have this small of a creature count to see if I can do something with it. And I think now, like, yeah, if you were to try to like, yeah, Izzet Guildmage is very cool. I want to pick it up. Like, it is powerful. It's an engine in a lot of ways. Like, that would be a problem you'd have to like solve for, and you'd have to pick up these old lists and like really solve for that. And I don't know if you could, like, maybe you'd have to introduce the pinger plan into yet another deck.
Yeah. So I think that's part of the problem, right? Like, I think we're getting to a point to where, and, you know, I don't want to be this guy to say that, but like, I mean, we had Hive recently and we had Izlain on it recently, right? And I'm using them two as the example because both of their lists they consider solved. So Severus and Wilson. And at this point, they're specifically only looking for upgrades because the decks are just so good at this point. And I would make a little bit of argument that your Sphinx Summoner list is relatively similar to that, Lobbert, that your deck has been created so well to, one, fit the meta. But realistically, I don't even think it fits the meta. I think the deck is generically just good that you're able to play it and always be threatening to where you could pivot. This is not my hot take, but I've always said most strongest decks in the format have the ability to pivot. That's just the way I've always thought because of my 60 card past. But it's very interesting to see these lists that are very conform to the competitive nature and are successful. I do think that some of these decks that we are talking about could see play, but like you said, Lobbert, there's a lot of hoops they really would have to jump through. Like, Ghost Tormod, please someone start playing it. I've seen it in a few tournaments here not too long ago, but like they've gotten their butts handed to them. When I played it, I could not win one game.
Yeah, but I saw Quartz playing a Ghost variant with Ghost Caddis. I still think that deck has some sort of legs. I think it's still on sea legs. Yeah, but it also has Caddis.
I like it.
And, you know, you're getting back Buccaneers bravado.
So with Caddis, does that you can pull back 3 cards, or like what's the point there?
No, you just get back Buccaneers bravado.
No, it's just symmetrical damage. It just helps you win the game. Yeah, it just helps you win in a timed environment.
Well, before we spoke, before we started recording, I did say when we were talking about Ghost Tormod, I've played against that deck in a casual setting, and it was a deck that was, I think, formerly competitive, that the player was handed, and they were like kind of like a non-factor in that game. Commanders have gone, they've come a long way, and a lot of the time, my standards are now like, is this giving me 1 card a turn? Because that's not good enough anymore. Commanders that are like 1 card a turn are like a dime a dozen, and it's converting that into the 3 or more that I think is, you know, what you got to look for now. And why I entertain, like, I don't know, a Parcel Beast, like that's
like
one.
Parcel Beast is a Simic pile, similar to Weaver's Ingression. I think it's still viable.
Well, Parcel Beast holds a soft place in my heart because any deck that plays, so this is me being old again, any deck that plays a Horseshoe Crab automatically is S tier in my brain. Whether it's not is a whole other story.
You heard that, Potato? Just for you.
Well, I'm you know, I also play Malcolm Arden, which plays Horseshoe Crab. So, you know, I mean, I originally, here's something you guys probably don't know. I originally picked up Malcolm Kedis because it was a Horseshoe Crab deck. Its original variant was a Horseshoe Crab Pilipala Viridian Longbow version. And when I
you just migrated over to white.
Yes, I did migrate that to white because I thought it was decent, but not with Kedis. And then when I played it the first time in like a competitive atmosphere, I had 0 abilities to win the game, and I was like, this is horrible. I put a Viridian Longbow on my Kedis. I'm like, what am I doing? Everything in play is like a 4-butt. How do I beat Abdel? There's 13 tokens. Like, what do I do? I don't know. It was very entertaining for like seeing a lot of these old commanders. I mean, the one that I still wish had legs is Armix. Armix is very near and dear to my heart. And I'm going to contradict myself here real quick. I don't know why Armix doesn't see play. but I literally know why Armix doesn't see play. In fact, Franklin, could you say why Armix doesn't see play? Because I've seen you do this, I've seen Aaron do it, and you guys have done it to me, which is awful.
Yeah. It was like, okay, Armix trigger on the stack. Stave off, block Armix. Oh no, Armix is dead. Now you got time walked.
Well,
From a single protection spell.
So to be fair, right, the reason that's important is because we have a shit ton of Boros commanders now. And the older Boros commanders were higher in mana value than the ones that exist now. Because now we have like the Gun that's only 3 mana. We have the Caliph, which is only 2
Arabella's, that's 2 mana.
Arabella's 2 mana, right? Like we used to do Commander Liara Porter, which not even going to go.
I wouldn't say unplayable, but almost there.
Well, it's just like these lower to the ground commanders just thrash poor old Armix. And it makes me sad.
Then the 4th thing only has 2 toughness.
Yeah.
You stick 2 chump blockers in front of it, it's dead.
Yeah, it's an attack trigger, which I really don't like. Like you have to actually have it be able to attack. That I think that's the biggest thing. And like if the format speeds up, now your removal spells on turn 4, if you even get it, which
I mean you have to like mulligan to a dark writ, but like
So let me hear your thoughts, Lobbert, on this one. So our standard turns now in the format is between 7 to 9. That's our normal time frame of games now. In this era, don't make too much fun of me with this one. In this era, our average games were 15 to 17. What are your thoughts about that? Don't laugh too hard.
I think it relates back to what I was saying of that perception of like there was just all of this setup time, and when the game was won and when these fights were had, it was, much later. And now the discussion is like, okay, if the average deck is trying to interact turn 5 or 6, can we try to get our win in on turn 4? And it's just like, I think, that of course, like competition is just going to breed like better decks, and the match clock is going to weed out the decks that are too greedy and are just like trying to be no win cons, just all interaction. So like, that in addition to the aggro decks, you can't do that anymore. There's too many edicts. You're not going to get an engine, and people like, I think, okay, here's an idea. A perception that I've heard a lot is basically Ophidian Eye is an engine, and from coming into the format a lot later, I call that a combo. Like it's non-deterministic,
really?
But it's so much. I think it's past this point of like 9 cards. 9 cards is
it's
like
disgusting.
if you untap, you're going to win. Period. You've won the game. You've assembled these 2 cards. That's a combo. I don't think all combos have to be infinite. It essentially wins the game though, and like the perception that wasn't doing that is just like ludicrous to me.
Well, it used to not do it. That's the craziest part, right? Because a lot of these pingers. So if we look at like some of the best decks of the format that we could say these days,
oh
like
my God, you're right.
The newer Malcolms and the new variants of late lore, and then the Gretchens, right? We'll just use those as the example here. Look at how many land untappers we've had in the past like year and a half, right? Look at all of the redundancy. We've even gotten more Landoras. We've gotten better blue cards, Lauren Revealed, aka the monster, right? Look at Malcolm and Kedis. Look at Malcolm and Breaches. Look at the deck is chocked full of pingers. We had 3 or 4. Yeah. Now we have like
Gator. So
16.
Yeah, because I had to look it up just now. Because I think we only had like 1 Thermal Alchemist, and now we have like 3. Thermal Alchemist came out in Eldritch Moon, which was I think 2016.
Yeah, so we had Hours of Devastation, we got Firebrand Archer. Then we had Eldritch Moon,
so you got
Firebrand. And then we had, what is it? It's the little Eldrazi squid. It's a Thermal Alchemist we got in that one. I forget the name of that set.
Yeah, in Eldritch Moon.
Eldritch Moon. So we had those 3, and excluding those 3, the next one we got after that, don't quote me on this, guys, don't hate me, I think it's Blister Spit Gremlin.
In Ikoria, which is like 2020.
Yeah, and then we've just gotten like whoosh.
So it makes sense because Unruly Catapult was Wilds of Eldraine, which just came out. Was it like
Gutter
2023?
Sight, Downshift, like just one after another, after another, after another. And I mean, they're busted, right? And look at all the land tappers we got recently. Like, it's insane. And so,
Well, I was going to argue with that on that one because we've had a whole bunch of old land untappers before. I think it's better land auras that really changed it.
well, I mean, yes, but we keep getting more and more. Like the point actually that I think I'm trying to make, and tell me if I'm wrong with this one, Lobbert, or do you disagree? Is that some of these older lists don't have the redundancy that these newer lists have now. Even your Sphinx Summoner list, you've created it to have the redundancy to solve the issue that we were discussing earlier. That, like, even Tatyova, as the example, right? You have a Tidal, you have no way to recreate that combo. You have a Ghostly Flicker, no way to recreate that combo. You have a way to recreate your combo, but you can also, if you lose it, you could beat phase where Tatyova does not have that line.
Yeah, no, I think I agree. The ones that have like been time tested and stuck around are the ones that don't just fold to a couple removal spells. It takes like, Gretchen and Weavers. It's like, or you have to remove every untapper you see. These red lists like Malcolm, like you see a pinger and it's not quite to the threat level of an untapper, but it will be the closer you get to 0 life. I guarantee it.
Yep.
Like they're like, you can't let them do anything, but they have 12 copies of it. And so it's really going to stress out the table to like even keep up with something like that.
I mean, let's use even other lists. I mean, let's just look at the Hollow Marauder list that recently won. Like that list is just a pile of redundancy too, right? Like it's just tons of rituals, tons of edicts, tons of draw, right? That's all the deck is.
Tons of self-sack just to recast Hollow Marauder.
Right? So it just outvalues you with an engine from the zone that doesn't need the extra pieces like this deck, where if you lose its commander, you don't care. You're helping the deck out, right? To where if you lose Ghost of Ramirez, you're like, I'll get to 5 mana. I'll get to 5 mana. Like, and you have to attack to get the trigger. Like, the heartbreak.
Yeah, blocking any of those old commanders is like just time walking them.
Yeah, like, it makes me so sad because I really wish a lot of these see play. It's kind of funny. I don't know if you know this story, Lobbert. This would probably be a pretty good one for you guys. The longest game I've had to date in the format was 4.5 hours. And that was when I was playing Crackling Drake against a Baleful Strix deck. That was back in the day where Baleful Strix played cards like Cremates. Like, this deck is so far in the tank. Its only means of winning the game was a Voltron finish with Cranioplating. And it was a pile of removal. At the 4.5 hour time frame limit, I stopped the other player and I was like, look, dude, we've been playing for 4.5 hours. My wife is going to divorce me if I go when I go upstairs if I don't leave immediately. I counted the cards in my library. I had 19 cards left in my deck. I was like, count your cards. They were like, I have 11. I was like, I have only counter spells. I can never recast my Drake. You can't kill me with that Strix because I have blockers and I have cards to kill it. You'll deck
you
before me.
Hit the commander tax limit from just playing
Yep.
all of the lands in your deck?
Yep, yeah.
I don't think that was possible, but...
And I was like, I'll just counter and kill your Strix and we'll be fine. So you'll never actually kill me. You have 11 cards left. You'll deck before me. I have a deep analysis in the list somewhere. I will make you draw those cards. And he was like, no, we played out. I was like, no, we will not play out. You have 11 cards. Mathematically, you lose. Concede. And he was like, no. And I was like, you beat me. I concede. You win. I got to go upstairs.
Yeah.
That's how crazy some of these decks were of the past. I mean, I had my Circular Logic lock loop set up as well with Soratomi Cloud Skater. So I had like I don't even know if you know that one, but it's super far in the tank. Super far in the tank. It's actually pretty insane. So Soratomi Cloud Skater, for you guys, is a very old card from way back in the day. It's just a 2-mana Moonfolk Wizard. That's a 2-mana 1/1 flyer that has pay to return a land you control to your hand and draw and discard a card. So you set it up with Mystic Sanctuary. You just return your land. And the card you had put on your library from the previous turn was Circular Logic. which is a madness card for 1 blue, counter target spell unless they pay 1 for each card in your graveyard. So once you set that up, it was a lock against your opponent. So they could never play, they had to play 2 cards per turn because you could counter 1 card definitively every single turn for the rest of the game. Yes, you see how that sees 0 play now.
Yeah, because you also have 2 other opponents.
Yeah, you had 2 other opponents then too. It's just it could see play in that era because you could get to that point in the game.
Yeah, you expect to see past turn 13. Like, honestly, in a tournament, if like turn 14 doesn't exist to me, I don't have a game logged at turn 14. All of those are draws.
Actually, do now for Blake Siverus in the last event. I won my second round on turn 14, which is kind of funny, but yeah, I don't think I could have done it with any other deck but Siverus. Good old slow and jolly Siverus. Still love it.
No, and that was just both of us going Siverus activation? No? Okay. Siverus activation? No? Okay. But you edict me, I edict you.
So let me hit you with this, Lobbert. Do you have any closing thoughts or anything else for us? Or
no, I just think that there's a lot of knowledge to be gained from like all of the work that a lot of players did back then, and like it pays to look at them and like figure out at least what they were doing and why they were doing it. And I think a discussion like this is very fruitful of like, well, why were they doing it? And we get to ask someone who's actually played. Yeah, thank you for letting me come on here and talk to you.
No, thank you. I really enjoyed your time. Really appreciate it. Would you like to plug your channel and stuff like that real quick?
Yeah, Lobbert, where can people find you?
If you just go to YouTube and type in Lobbert, Lobbert, I'll come up, and that's jumping off point for the other stuff that I do. I'm primarily a YouTuber.
Perfect.
Any Twitter, Blue Sky?
They're all secondary. I don't. Like, I'm almost off of Twitter. Like every day, I think like, why do I still do this? Like I had a tweet go viral. It got like 3,000 likes. You know what that did for my channel? I lost subscribers that day. I lost 3 subscribers that day.
Oh my God.
Yep.
So I don't think it does anything for me. But like I have thoughts that I need to get out, and that's my megaphone. But not something
Totally
I'm pushing.
fair. Totally fair. Well, I mean, thank you so much again for joining us today. And guys, definitely give Lobbert a look. We will put some of these decks down in the description below. If you guys like, we can actually put the old tier list if needed. If you guys would like to request it or not. But some of these decks may be viable. Don't quote me, but I definitely think you guys should give them a look, see what you could pull out of it. I'm still going to hold a lot of hope for my old boy Armix, and I do know there's a few people out there still playing the old Crackling Drake and trying to see if it's still viable or not. But
that's one I do still see all the time. Crackling
do you?
Drake.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
Very cool. Yeah, I have not seen it, but I am hoping to see it. So
You see it every day in your dreams. What are you talking about?
I do. I still have my full copy. But with all that said, Franklin, take us home.
All right. So if you made it this far, please subscribe to the channel. Give us a follow over on Spotify. And if you remember playing any of these old decks, please sign up for AARP and go get your colonoscopy scheduled.
What the fuck?
Very good.
So with that, please support our channel either by subscribing, becoming a member over on Patreon. We have the RSS feed for all of the audio podcasts that are going up. We're over on TikTok. I forgot if there's any other socials. No, we're on Twitter as well. I think it's somewhere in the link tree. And with that, thank you, everyone. Have a great week.
Remember to hydrate.
Shout out to all of our patrons: Eric, Aaron, Dax, Devin, NYC Burrito, Little Rat Lotad, Frank, Scoob, HZ, and William. Thank you for all of your support.